Okay, well, I'm going to introduce our next fireside chat now to the audience, and delighted to have Jerome Lussan with me today, the founder and CEO of Lavin Partners. We're going to be asking the question: how are regulated platforms evolving their value proposition, and how is this likely to change post-Brexit? Many of you may well know Lavin Partners. They offer a regulated hosting platform, Lavin Advisors LLP. This allows individuals the opportunity to conduct regulated activities as an appointed representative. This avoids the need to go directly through FCA approval, which can take up to 9 months. Jerome's platform gives people the opportunity to start running regulated activities within a few weeks whilst they're waiting for their FCA approvals. And this also is an opportunity for those that post FCA approval can also operate as AIFMs and MiFID managers using the Lavin platform. So it's certainly an extremely valuable proposition in the current environment. Jerome, I think I would like to just start by maybe getting a sense of how the value proposition of hosted platforms has maybe changed in the last couple of years. I get a feeling there's maybe a bit more, or has been a bit more, vigilance from the regulators on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, over the last even 5 years, I would say the value has increased tremendously, and with increased value, increased usage, and increased scrutiny. Certainly, there were a variety of platforms out there. There still are. To be a good platform, you need to have the regulatory umbrella, of course, but you also need to have the compliance skills, and then you need to have the risk skills. And I guess on the latter and even the former, so both compliance and risk, you could get away with not doing too much for a few years. I think this is now over. There was a whole review of the business by the FCA in 2018, which led to their Dear CEO letter 2019, which most of the serious platforms have adopted fully in order to keep meeting the FCA rules, which they should have met before, but some of them perhaps, like many, struggled with some of the compliance aspects. And of course, compliance has increased, as we know, in many respects. So for any platform which is handling many clients as appointed representatives or as managers, you're seconded to the main platform or the host or the principal, as it's known, it meant a lot more work. So platforms like ourselves have adopted better standards, have adapted to the new rules. We've used a lot of technology. So we license software from Lavin Tech, a group company, which distributes compliance software in order to stay on top of all of the monitoring that both clients and ourselves must do and simplify it and make it easier. So I think in that regard, the value proposition is a lot higher than it used to be. And it's a much more of a fast track, one hand holding serious setup than it used to be.
Yeah. And I have you been seeing maybe increased interest in managers who are starting their businesses in the, not just this year, but maybe over the last 12 months, that are maybe spinning out of existing shops that want to get to market quickly, and but have got to be careful about choosing the right regulatory host?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the pipeline is huge. We turn down clients whom we think we either find are too risky a profile, or perhaps too retail driven. Sometimes, I mean, again, the whole concept of retail has changed with MiFID II. So we are looking for clients who want to work with professional clients. But this is a bit confusing to startups or young managers, because a rich person who may be well educated in finance may not qualify as a professional. So they become retail. And that is a big subject of scrutiny for the FCA, even if it is what we call sophisticated retail. So the demand has increased massively because, of course, of the delays on getting an FCA application, the complication of finding a good compliance officer, or doing it yourself, which is complicated, even with a consultant. The risk, the reporting There's lots of reporting requirements which are more and more convoluted. The need to put capital up front. If you're a regulated company, you need a minimum capital, which is locked in. The criminal liability if you're a money laundering officer, that goes with that. So if you join a hosting platform, all of that is passed on to us, and I think it alleviates a lot of problems and headaches. So we've seen an increasing pipeline in the last 12 months. There's also a reduction in the market because there are less platforms which can take on business because of the scrutiny from the FCA. And although the Dear CEO letter was 2019, the FCA has continued to investigate platforms in relation to how they work with their own appointed representatives and clients and their own clients. So we see probably a limited offering in the market today.
This emphasis on increased compliance, it's quite and the risk oversight and the reporting. I mean, for any new manager, it is quite daunting. And as you say, they've got to have sufficient capital. That there are liabilities that they are exposing themselves to. But also, Jerome, has it delayed the FCA approval process this year?
From our consulting group, we don't see that. The FCA has been quite good at picking up new applications. However, and perhaps this is more linked to Brexit and the ambition of being a third-party country, it is spending more time on applications. It is spending more time on the applicants themselves. This is also connected to the SMCR regime, the senior manager and certification regime, which now applies to asset managers. So all in, the FCA applications take longer, but I don't think it's to do with a lack of resources due to COVID.
Right. No, but it's more on the kind of the scrutiny of the applicant, I guess. And obviously for managers, they have got, as I say, this ability to avail of an outsourced compliance engine, really, that you are providing at Lavn. You have really focused a lot over recent years, I think, in terms of, well, let's call it RegTech, but part of a wider, you've almost evolved into a fintech firm with Lavn Tech, as you've alluded to, and you've become one of the leading compliance providers. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how that's benefiting your clients, that you have got this suite of compliance tools that are frankly needed for anyone who is running any MiFID or AFM related business today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the last decade in compliance has been really interesting. You could either keep the same old model or you could change. And we decided to change. We created Lavn Tech, an independent company that focused on developing systems to support all steps in compliance. So from compliance diary, which sounds mundane, but it's something that you forget, and then the FCA slaps your fingers, to compliance monitoring, which is tailored to the client specifically. So whether you're a private equity or venture capital, as opposed to a hedge fund or liquid firm, all of our testing and monitoring is adapted inside of a software to ask the right questions to produce the right report, which you can then deliver to your investors or to obviously your governance or to the FCA. So in this regard, we really wanted to focus on that because everyone recognizes in compliance, most tasks are mundane and repetitive. And the key is not necessarily to be super smart about them, although they're getting more and more convoluted, but rather to do them properly and demonstrate that you have done so. And we've completely achieved that. And today, by doing that, every client that we have, for example, on the hosting platform, will have a checklist for money laundering on their own clients, which they have to do. And we have to make sure as principle that they procure. The checklist is much easier than taking old paper and tabs. It is completely integrated in the software. It can be shared with the outside client. You can upload documents. It will guide you through each and every step so you don't forget any. And there you go, it's done. Every client will have a financial promotion module. So if they're writing a PowerPoint and they're not sure what they should say in there, they'll be able to cross-check all the COBS rules, deliver a report again on having ascertained that they've crossed it, have a 4I principle if they want within their firm or with us as principal. And again, they'll be able to move on faster. All of these things like client suitability, if you're proposing to advise a client on your hedge fund, you must ensure that the hedge fund is suitable for that client. That's a suitability assessment, again, tagged, even scored, so that you can say this client scores over 70% if that's what you choose. And it means every time you can talk to them. It means we save about 40% of our time, of our clients' time. And I think clients really, really appreciate that. What they really like is it's very flexible, configurable to their needs, and it's very open architecture tools, but all driven by our own compliance department's know-how. And that again is a very unique part of Lavin. You know, by dividing ourselves between hosting with compliance consultant experts and a technology group that can develop different tools all day long, we have the best of all worlds. And it really has helped clients get started faster and succeed better in their business because they can spend their time focusing on what they need to do.
Right. And do you tend to find as well, though, Jerome, that post their approval, that they choose to remain on the platform, but because of all of the benefits that you've pointed out, all of the compliance support and so on that they're getting, that they maybe feel they don't need to take that step to become, I think, a standalone?
Very much so. I mean, I know that in the industry, there's supposedly quite a lot of clients who go to a host and then leave the host. At Lavin, we've experienced very little of that, a lot less of that, I think, than the industry normal standard percentage. And I think the reason is because of all that we offer. It is rather unique. Now, of course, some clients decide to do an FCA application, and it's perfect. They stay on with the consulting group. They may even just license the technology and carry on, and that has happened. And we don't mind either way. You know, that's the other positive thing. We're just happy that the clients succeed. That's what counts. We also like to integrate ourselves in the client's data, you know, their portfolio. If they're seconded as a manager, as a MiFID manager, or as an AFIM, we are able to understand their data, understand their risk. We've got great risk tools which we can share with them. And also we are able to use the data to do all the regulatory reporting, which is a huge headache. You know, there is MiFIR, there is EMIR, there's now an update on EMIR. We're facing how we are going to deal with that with Brexit, and that's being handled by our risk team today. So for a client to do that standalone, it is a lot of work, and it's evolved a lot in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and all of, you know, the hosted platform concept, the model, there are plenty of choices, but not all platforms, you know, are equal. The FCA and other European regulators have voiced their concerns over maybe not very, you know, and I'm talking the platforms here, maybe they're not doing a good job accurately reporting on behalf of their clients. They're not giving really sufficient risk oversight and compliance oversight, and they're just not up to scratch. You know, that is a risk that people need to be aware of, that you know, they are kind of really on board with a platform that takes these things seriously, that is going to be keeping them out of the line of sight of the regulators. Yeah,
I mean, we've inherited clients who left platforms because in the end, maybe the SFTR reporting or the EMIR reporting wasn't done properly or wasn't even on offer. You know, when all of this came out, some platforms decided to say that that was the responsibility of the appointed representative, and they needed to have their own license to the reporting entity. I think that makes it very difficult for clients. So we never took that view. We always jumped in and said, well, it's our problem, and let's make it work. And I think now, you know, some people also misreported, maybe using the wrong timestamps, small technicalities. But that meant that some clients we've inherited also had to re-report all of their trades from last year, which is, you know, it's always a headache and takes time, and you can never know when this will happen. So it's always hard when you're choosing a platform to know what questions to ask. It's you know, none of this is obvious if you are a startup. So so it's good if you've got someone who's willing to explain this to you. And we find that we're involved a lot, especially with clients who may have a UCITS or an AIFM in Ireland or Luxembourg, and then they need to be in the UK as a MiFID manager. They have lawyers involved. We're involved with the lawyers. We help with their contracts as much as we can. Obviously, we don't do legal advice, but you know, we're trying to put the pragmatic operational hat on so that they can join us as soon as possible and get going. So all of this is very much part and parcel of what we're trying to put together, and we co-work with other hosting platforms in Europe as need be in order to make sure this is successful. We also co-work with brokers, administrators, custodians, to make sure all of those trade links work out so that we can all have oversight over any risk or any portfolio management.
So I'm just wondering, I mean, let's get to the real critical point with Brexit now, just around the corner. You know, the UK has now become a third country, and, you know, the whole passporting appeal of a UK AIFM will disappear. So how are you thinking about this as a UK FCA authorized firm, and what are the what kind of questions are you asking internally as to how you will maybe help your UK clients, you know, when they are looking to continue to market and distribute their funds going into next year?
Yeah, so there's two aspects to that, quite as you've just said, James. So there is the how do I market, and then there is the how do I manage. Now, we've come out of the EU, right? That was in January. And we are in transition period till December. And then come next January, probably the 4th of January, which is a working day, we're out. In relation to managing assets, there's more flexibility, and different countries have said, well, we can continue to work with the UK. So if you're sub-managing as a MiFID manager in an EU UCITS or an EU AIFM, then that will continue, because of course the EU doesn't want to put at-risk investors returns. When it comes to distribution, this is far harder, because here, you know, the EU sees us as taking a share of the market by taking investors out of the EU into our UK earning products. So that distribution stops on the 4th of January. A lot of people are saying, well, it will depend on a few things, and indeed it will. It will depend on whether there's a deal. I believe there will be a deal, but I don't believe financial services will be covered in the deal, because that's an easy one for the EU to push out. So, you know, fish are more important than shares right now in this context.
Right.
And with that in mind, I think we will have, therefore, no more passporting. So everything that we can do today, walk across to Italy or Spain or wherever to promote a product, so long as the product is also registered, will stop. And the difficulty is, how do you continue that 4th of January onwards? I don't see too many solutions. One of them is to say, well, I'll also use an appointed representative similar system in the EU. The problem with that is you have to have substance in the EU for that to be true. And at the moment, you're stuck here because of COVID, for starters. So you're still likely to make your phone calls and your emails from the UK. And that would be a complete breach of the exit of the EU and the rules. So I don't know who wants to take that risk. You know, from the client side, it's not great. You could be mis-selling. From the host, who might be in Europe, there's a lot of risk too, unless the host is really a third-party distributor. But even that's complicated, because if it is a third-party distributor, what does it do? Does it bring clients to call you? And you could call that reverse solicitation, but the FCA has already highlighted that reverse solicitation is obviously going to be a risk, because it depends on the local rules. So I'm not sure it will work to have a third-party distributor that brings back clients who call you back in the UK for you to continue then exchanging marketing information with them. The other option is to set up in the EU. Obviously that's expensive, and again you need substance, so you need your people there, and that's a big cost, especially for a startup. So I would say for now, as much as you can, focus on your key assets. The reality is a lot of your investors are probably not in the EU, especially for more alternative products. So that's great.
Sure.
Use the UK, go to Hong Kong, go to America, and try and raise business that way. And let's see how things unwind, rather than invest too much energy and money at this point in time into trying to get a few investors.
Jerome, it remains for me to just say good luck for the rest of this year, and we'll be looking carefully at how things develop next year, post Brexit.
It's going to be very good. I'm very optimistic, so I think we'll do very well.
Well, we like optimism, Jerome, so that's much appreciated.
Thank you, James.